Thank you very much. I'd really love to thank the Loft for helping make this possible too, and to have it in this wonderful space. Minnesota is a land full of poets and full of amazing women poets. This is just a small sampling of the riches that we have here in Minnesota. But all of these poets are near and dear to my heart, and I absolutely love their poetry, and I'm so excited that we'll all be able to listen to them share their work. The way the evening's going to work is that we will all read for about 5 to 7 minutes, and then we'll change over into a panel discussion about women and poetry. So I'll begin the evening by reading the biographies of the poets at the beginning. We'll be going in reverse alphabetical order, because it's not fair that the people with A and B names always get to go first. Right, Carrie? Right. Okay. Cary Waterman is a poet and creative nonfiction writer. Her published poetry books include The Salamander Migration, University of Pittsburgh Press, When I Look Back, You Were Gone, finalist for the Minnesota Book Award, and most recently, Book of Fire, finalist for Midwest Book Award. Her essay, Horizon, was recently published in the online journal RKVRY. Her work appears in many anthologies, including A Geography of Poets, Poets Against the War, the Logan House Anthology of 21st Century American Poetry, and 150 Years of Minnesota Poetry. She has won awards from the Bush Foundation, the Ignite Foundation, and the Minnesota State Arts Board. She teaches creative writing at Augsburg College in the undergraduate and the MFA programs. Katrina Vandenberg is the author of 2 books of poems, The Alphabet Not Unlike the World and Atlas. Her essays and poems have appeared in The American Scholar, Blackbird, The Southern Review, Orion, The Sun, on NPR's All Things Considered, and elsewhere. She is the recipient of fellowships from the Fulbright, Bush, and Loft McKnight Foundations, and residencies from the Amy Clampett Fund, the Poetry Center of Chicago, and the MacDowell Colony. She teaches creative writing at Hamline University and lives in St. Paul with her husband, novelist John Reimringer. I call him that, and their daughter. I want to make sure to do it in reverse alphabetical order. Kathryn Kysar is the author of Pretend the World from Holy Cow Press in 2011, Dark Lake, Loon Feather, and the editor of a collection of essays, Riding Shotgun, Women Writing About Their Mothers. Her poems have been heard on a Writer's Almanac and published in many literary magazines, including Great River Review, Midland Review, Mizna, and Painted Bride Quarterly. Kaiser has received fellowships from the National Endowment for the Humanities, Minnesota State Arts Board, and the Anderson Center for Interdisciplinary Studies. She served as an individual representative on the board of directors for the Association of Writers and Writing Programs. I did miss it. I didn't do it right. Leslie was supposed to be next. I'm sorry. Leslie Adrienne Miller's 6th collection of poems is Why, which was released from Grey Wolf Press just recently. Her previous collections include The Resurrection Trade, Eat Quite Everything You See, Yesterday Had a Man in It, Ungodliness, and Staying Up for Love. Professor of English at the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul, Minnesota since 1991, she holds degrees in creative writing and English from Stephens College, the University of Missouri, the Iowa Writers Workshop, and the University of Houston. And Sierra DeMulder earned Best Female Poet at the College Union Poetry Slam Invitational in 2009. Less than 2 months later, she was awarded a coveted publishing deal from Right Bloody Publishing, which led to her first full-length book, The Bones Below, published in January of 2010. Her second book, New Shoes on a Dead Horse, was published in January 2012 by Right Bloody Publishing. Sierra has been featured in hundreds of venues across the country, performing her poetry and facilitating writing workshops in high schools, colleges, homeless shelters, prisons, churches, farmers markets, and people's basements. When not doing poetry, she enjoys playing ukulele, making full use of public transportation, and waxing on about feminism. Please welcome our poets. And we'll begin with Cary Waterman.
Oh, thank you, Kris. And thanks, everybody, for coming out. And thank you, my sister poets here. It's so great to be in your company. I'm going to start in, we have 5 minutes. Okay, 5 minutes. Look at the watch. 5 to 7. Make that 7. Oh, no. I'm going to read a couple of poems from my book, Book of Fire, last book, and then I'm going to read some new poems. And this one is one of the Persephone poems. I'm thinking a lot about Persephone again because spring is coming. I mean, we can tell spring is coming. Even the birds sound differently the last week or so. So this is called Persephone in Hades. It's a girl's job to go to Hades. How he'd wake her in the dark, his winter need, flesh on flesh for warmth. The dog came every morning, stood by their bed, a trinity of heads, birth, death, and in between. The girl reached, the dog bowed, said the girl was holy, a visitor from another kingdom, said it was she who must lift up every spring and lay the winter dark down. Without her, only oblivion. Said she must give thanks for all of it, honey cakes for the god, a bone for the bitch dog, her dry dugs, her slippery tongue. And this one, if it hadn't been summer, if it had only been December or January, if it had been ice, snow, and cold, fur boots, coats, mittens, layers and layers of warmth, if she hadn't felt the way her heart opened, its icy harness stretching, loosening. But it was summer. Summer in Denver, chilled, Coors 3-2 beer, Madras plaid dresses. There was no one to save her. It was bare skin, tanned limbs, drinks with ice singing. It was hot. The all-night market served up chips and a six-pack under fluorescent lights sticky with bug juice. They camped one weekend, up into the foothills past St. Mary's Glacier, a slippery bowl of summer ice. And the last day, he sat on the hood of their car, broke open their last bottle, told her all about all the women he'd known. The next time, it would be winter. She'd be pregnant, not able to keep up as he plunged ahead through all that deep snow. So these are new poems. One last couple of years, last year or two. This one is called X, as in the letter. I never know what to call you. Deceased ex-husband, to decease, cease and desist, stop. Sometimes I think I'll just say ex-husband. Let them think you're still alive, since divorce is a kind of death, an exness. Or sometimes I think I'll say deceased, and let them think we never split, that there was not a death before the death, that we stayed married until the grieving end. Sometimes I think the words should be in chronological order, as in ex-husband deceased, but then the question, if you are an ex, do I even need to care about deceased? And sometimes now when I think of you, sad to say, for your soul and all that, it seems as if you've always been dead, although no one thought of death when we met, or of divorce, that first night in the bed in the basement apartment, or later when you tied white bows on the cat's collars for our wedding day. Or is this just me, hard of feeling, except there are children and 15 years of a life together. But truth be told, it sometimes seems like it never happened at all, and I am asking your forgiveness and your indulgence for that. Ectoplasm. The news today, bad, evil. news of endings, of noise, death, sickness, sickness unto death. Then three-quarter moon in the east rising. My old life reaches out. There are tentacles and tentacles, well-meaning, but tentacles nonetheless. What is memory, if not that gray octopus, ectoplasm? Please don't go. And maybe I'll end with this one. I don't know. Okay, last poem. Everyone knows what a naturist resort is, yeah. Naturist resort. They don't call them nudist colonies anymore. Well, I didn't know that. They call them naturist resorts. Okay. Resort. You can't not look at a man's penis. The first day at the naturist resort, even though there are very strict rules about ogling. The brochure said clothing optional. And you envisioned bathrobes all around until slipping into the tepid pools. But here he comes. And you look away into woods, and he who is approaching, somewhat like Jesus, slender, long crucifixion legs, wearing nothing but flip-flops and a sun hat, gentlemanly drapes his towel across himself as you pass and says, "Hi." And the disciple, taking reservations in the office and giving out maps under his shirt and shorts and Justin Bieber smile. He is naked too. A young man who might be doubting Thomas, flagrantly tattooed and overweight, grills his burgers naked. A Magdalene crosses the path in her straw hat and long red hair. So you join them in the party pool. Everyone buoyant, some more than others, where flesh parses art and politics. Back before the tree, the apple, the godly curse. Thank you.
Oh, I can't follow that. And thank you, thank you so much for coming. I will be reading 3 poems from the alphabet, not unlike the world. The first one is the prologue, and it is a ghazal for the letter A, and I'm reading it for Kris in gratitude. The Phoenician A is Aleph. The ox points its nose forward. A is strong enough to pull the train of letters through the poem. A. See the yoke clutch its neck. Is the poet driving? No. It's the man who hewed the yoke, leading the ox to market, to heap A with what he needs to get through winter. He is sending the letters on a long drive through early snow. What will burden A before it can return to the barn? A for alpha, most important, an alpha dog, a compelling man, a lucid star, O scarlet letter A, for spontaneous abortion, the early miscarriage's true name. The doctor adds, it's nothing you did, even if it does start with A. Not your fault, this bloody end to a beginning. Squeezes your hand each time. In the beginning was the apple, round and red. A, apple of my eye, your father used to say. A for the round red embryonic sac. Ard apple, Dutch for potato, starts with A. Ground apple, ard meaning earth, sounds like hard. It's a hard world sometimes, hard packed under oxen feet. And A for aardvark too, for absence, abstain, absinthe. A sleeps on its side in the straw. In one Nordbrandt poem I like, A, already in the word's first letter, the word already is there. And in the word already, the whole sentence. as the almond tree is in each almond and a whole almond grove in the tree. Already in the beginning was the word, the letter A, gold stars, almonds, you can have another, asshole, and alienate. Apple of my eye, your father said, twinkling A, that dangles from its stem, that cannot last, that gets one booted from the garden every time. What bears fruit this time of year? A, insists Nordbrandt. Already in the word's first letter, the almond trees are in bloom. Saith the Lord, I am the Alpha and the Omega. Saith Katrina, already the pure child and all the unborn inside it have been forgotten with the path the ox broke through the snow. The second poem is called Courage and Horror Stand Side by Side, and the title comes from a speech I saw the former head of the Center for Victims of Torture give at a performance of Speak Truth to Power. Courage and horror stand side by side, say the gods who dole out fates, like the one they give the massage therapist raped in her office by a stranger off the street. Raped face down on her table in dimness and lavender oil. No, this is yours, say the gods, handing off a profusion of fall days in Boston when the boy you loved was dying. Each morning on your way to see him, you cut a bouquet of cosmos from the front steps of a brownstone. The other, not yours, is braver than yours, how it ends. The therapist feared she would die, hating him, and began to chant, and the panicked rapist ran, not knowing she was chanting the Buddhist prayer for compassion. And did you sing for your enemies? No. The gods are busy. The cosmos are lavender, rose, tangled, and orange, replacing themselves in what seems ours. The final poem I'd like to read tonight is called Fuchsia, and like a lot of people who go to Ireland, I was really struck by all the fuchsia plants on the side of the road, and I hadn't realized that tropical plants grow in Ireland because I know it doesn't seem likely because the water keeps the island warm enough. And I owe a debt to this poem to Ethna McKiernan because she has a wonderful poem about fuchsia also that I remember every time I read this. Fuchsia. That summer in the West, I walked sunrise to dusk, narrow, twisted highways without shoulders, low stone walls on both sides. Hedgerows of fuchsia hemmed me in, the tropical plant now wild, centuries after nobles imported it for their gardens. I was unafraid, did not cross to the outsides of curves, did not look behind me for what might be coming. For weeks in counties Kerry and Cork, I walked through the red blooms the Irish call the tears of God, blazing from the brush like lanterns. Who would have thought a warm current touching the shore of that stone-cold country could make lemon trees, bananas, and palms not just take, but thrive? Wild as the jungles they came from, where boas flexed around their trunks. Like my other brushes with miracles, the men who love you back, how they come to you gorgeous and invasive, improbable, hemming you in. And you walk that road blazing, some days not even afraid to die.
Well, thank you for this. This is great fun. I have 3 poems to read you, and I picked them while I was looking at the questions that Kris prepared for us, so I'm not going to say much, but when we get to the questions, these were chosen with my answers in mind. And the first one is called When Menthol Was Queen. My mother kept coming to my mind as I was thinking about those questions. So, when menthol was queen. No blue beckons so much as chlorine blue, bottom of the pool blue, faintly bearing the faces of flushed mothers, a stringent partner to rubber loungers welded to the backs of knees in seconds. We of the inland summers crave only this blue, this gorgeous replica doubled and rocking beneath even a fierce sky. Now we know what they were doing when they raced away in their hot bucket seats, our mothers, craving a smoke on the patio, the long coil of phone cord caught in a screen door, fuchsia jello and orange shag, nothing to the long gash of turquoise to which they delivered us. And 30 years before we even wondered where they went or why. The satisfaction of an entire Naughty Pine kitchen scrubbed in liquid gold lasts only so long. And cans of pillow mint green, meant to cover every inch of the garage, yield up only enough bright toxin for one season, beyond which we of the barcodes of box stores and breast pumps are expected to proceed differently, and do, though the arrow will eventually find us too, bring us back to the blue wedge from which we can finally see her huddled in the cove between spruces out back, where her smoke rises into the cool prickle and pucker, delivering her from each fierce escape she can imagine, all her fancy hanker and aim in blue dissolve. I think my mother smoked instead of writing poems, although she won't admit it now. This next one is from my last book, and it's called Mirabilia. There's a series of historical poems in this book, and this one is from 1726. It's based on a Hogarth print. There was a story in England of a woman who had given birth to rabbits. And you can see the Hogarth print. You can look it up on the internet. It's very funny. There's a picture of a woman in the courtroom. She was taken to court eventually for her I guess she was arrested for doing this, which is just wild. But there's a picture of her in the courtroom with lots of rabbits running out from underneath her skirt. And there's a lot of different versions of this story, so I kind of cherry-picked from different ones. And the title, Mirabilia, is Miracles. The local doctor took her for a gloomy sort, a little daft but strong. Her husband worked in cloth and got on her 3 live young before this last, most curious brood, a whole tribe of rabbits springing forth in groups of 3 or 4. Harvest in Surrey being nearly done, and maybe that year only a meager store, leeks and turnips, a few thick-skinned gourds. Perhaps they'd been a little short, but rabbits were abundant, and her boy able in getting litters young and whole enough to plant in Mary's lap, her roomy burrow readied from easy passage of 3 prior infant skulls. The village was ready, too, for some miracle of birth, even if it was just rabbits coming on with winter's chill. By her own report, Mary took a longing in the field one day when a rabbit sprang up like a bright idea from the dying Queen Anne's lace and giant fennel. So her 5 weeks' child afloat in the womb fell away that night with a dream. These blind and skinless babies curled in the child's lost place and drank of her waters, waited for light and a man midwife ready with belief. Even after churching, more rabbits fell from her marvelous loins in Guildford, so the English court brought her into town to have a look. And though they caught the serving boy with pockets full of blind and slippery bunnies, and trundled Mary Tofts off to jail after her confession, the fact remained that she had fooled at least a 6 educated men by simply being what she was, mammal, mystery, cave and warren, unmapped womb, a woman. I love that story. Last one I'm going to read is the last one in the new book, Why. It's called Souvenir, and it's actually souvenir as in French. Remember is not a reflexive verb in English like perjure. To remember is not to remind, though it is to welcome into the mind a veritable lived moment that has embossed itself in some durable way. For new love, we bring scenes swept into maudlin corners, and we love that the lover pays attention. It's no accident that attention is to love what cash is to commerce, to what the rest of the world might call narcissistic or worse. If I told you my mother practiced smoke rings on the patio while my sister and I were safely shut in our neighbors' rumpus rooms, you might find your own mother suddenly on a porch, in a car, in the grove beyond the fence with that same cigarette and yourself flushed with some golden thing at the thought of it. Though what the mind chose to save is variation on a theme. Barnacle drawing detritus into a carapace built on someone else's narrative. Whether you count it narcissistic depends on how much mystery or misery you can weld to the terrace substrate of a childhood. Memories are a coin of the realm, as good for sales, science, and industry as for love. And let's not forget, hell has circles too. Thank you.
I got sunburned today. It's very cool. So I'm going to read a little bit about early spring. This is early spring, Dark Lake. The morning birds outside the window at the feeder savor the rusty burnt cookie, chirping the deep brown cries of northern winter nearly over. They sing of leaves, birch, rock, and spirit. I get out the map and the paintbrush, rewrite the landscape as it unveils in the morning light. The birds flit across the lake covered with ice and snow, edged with elm and oak, stone and grass. The sun and moon seem to touch as the wind grips the last dream-scented house next to the cracking ice. The horses toss their angry yellow manes. The land is a shell opening. Have you heard the ice cracking at this time of year up north? It's so magnificent. And this is another poem from when I lived up north. The Pregnant Wife Forgets. She reads, your brain gets smaller, shrinks with pregnancy, the words, thoughts, and images and fluids migrating to the thighs, belly, and breasts. She forgets the stamps on her birthday party invitations, forgets the driveway of her best friend, calling lost from a convenience store half a mile down the road. But she never forgets the grocery list. Grape juice, spinach, noodles, grated cheddar cheese. On impulse, she buys chocolate milk, hard salami she eats hidden in the car, forbidden. At night, she floats free from her huge body, breathing lightly to the dreams that turn inside her belly, images of strollers and red-haired boys, babies that pop out like miracles, her body thin and taut, restored. During the day, she forgets, but at night, she remembers. And our friend Hyde Erdrich was going to join us today, but she can't because she didn't have any childcare, and she wanted me to mention that to you, that this is one of the difficulties with being a woman poet. So I will read my poem for Hyde in her absence. This is called Hand Sisters. Our hands trace the same path, length of fingers, broad knuckles, the curved nail of the thumb. Our hands fit together as cousins in flat, dry lands of distant buttes, sagebrush, and a big, wide sky that devours birds, displays the sun and moon as the centerpiece to all. Our sisters' hands fit ours, hands descended from Nebraska, North Dakota, Idaho, flat-fielded land, prairie land, almost desert at times. These hands, gifts of knife-wielding butchers, steak-pounding railroad workers, hold our German daring, your Ojibwe generosity and wit. These hands are big and capable, strong and wise, long fingers able to pluck the words that we desire from a cacophony of sounds, of flight, of light, to build the stories that lead us back to the land, back to our grandfathers, back home. And I'm going to end on a poem because it reminds me a little bit of your poem that you read, but it is also a dream. It was a dream that I had 5 times, and then Hyde dreamed it the 6th time. So I've got it included in there. This is called Adrift. I dream you are having an affair. It is unconsummated. You gently hold her hand in front of government centers and art galleries, my girlfriends driving by slowly, long enough to glimpse her sensible gray bob, your long intertwined fingers. I am not hollow, nor does anger overwhelm me. We are drifting, having grown familiar with this landscape, the way the trees bend, the subtle shades of light on the leaves, the beating of waves on the lakeshore, the moonlight's reflection on our aging faces, the stoop of the shoulder, the soft rounded stomach, all of this within reach, all of this that you're giving up. Thank you.
Hello, thank you so much for having me, Kris. I'm going to read a couple of poems from my book. One of the themes in my book is based on the Roman belief that creative people weren't actually geniuses, but they had like a genius spirit that lived in the walls of their studio and inhabited them as they did their work. So in that way, like if you painted a beautiful picture, I would say, oh, your genius was really on today. And if I wrote a horrible poem, you'd be like, oh, your genius is a little lame today. And that way you would never have to take full credit for your work. And I found this really exciting to write about my creative fairy genius thing because, I mean, maybe just because I found a different way to talk about myself. So these are, I'll do a couple of poems from my genius. And this is, when I find it, The Genius Goes to the Art Museum. He enjoys the entrance the most, but not because of the gift shop. He already owns hundreds of magnets and an impressive coffee mug collection that crowds his counters and windowsills. He started collecting mugs to hold his other collections, pennies dated before 1943, capless markers, lithium batteries, hundreds of marker caps. He is particularly proud of his denture collection, which he's found makes an adequate calendar. Every morning after breakfast but before shaving, he retrieves his current pair. Before fitting the smile into his mouth, he pulls out 1 tooth per day. Plastic gums, like pink, half-eaten sandwiches, cover his bathroom floor, each with only 1 or 2 teeth left, depending on the month. Today, he has 17 teeth. He is sitting on a bench outside the coat check at the art museum and does not intend on going any farther. It's not that he doesn't enjoy art. He believes it's just like masturbating. Sometimes you have to do it, and sometimes you just do it because you're bored. He even paints occasionally, but not as much as the other thing. He visits the art museum every 8th tooth, not to look at beautiful things, but to watch beautiful things come and go. A toddler drawing a koi fish in the air with her finger. A purple-haired teenager pickled in angst humming a tune he has never heard before. A woman searching for a pen. An old man who cannot stop crying. He is watching art in its purest form. The moment of inception. The shaken soda can. The blister. So I guess that was less about me. But this one's about me. Not that you guys need to know that, but. The genius shares his opinion of astrology. And you know what else? She's all proud to be a Gemini. She tells everyone as if crazy was a prize show horse she wants to tie up in the front yard. Why would anyone want to feel things twice? Like, yes, I'll have the electric chair and the spear. I'll take the food poisoning and the poison. May I please fall in love with two different people at the same time until love is peeling itself away from me in all directions like I am a fucking banana or wishbone. Some days I feel sorry for her, I really do. She doesn't realize it, but she is starving. She's got too many mouths to feed on that head of hers. She's got too many heads on that vase of a neck. It must be like making love to a puppet show. The genius discusses suicide. To carve your name onto the trophy of the noose and the floorless. To spit shine it for eternity. To become not why your father drinks, but what carries him on a chariot of tremors to drink again. To sign up for the obituary circus. Come see the magical, the ones who do what others cannot. See the exhaust swallower, the dangling acrobat, the blue-finned mermaid who floats face down in a tank with gills on her wrists. To stare and be stared at forever. The unsaid word, the forgotten dream, the poem she will always write and never finish. And then I'm going to do, most of my accolades are actually based in spoken word or slam poetry. I only just in the past couple of years have gotten into more academic page poetry work. But I'm going to do one of my spoken word pieces, and I promise you it's not rap, but if it was, that'd be fine too. But I'm going to do a spoken word piece because up next week there is a national poetry slam competition coming to Minneapolis. It's the Women of the World Poetry Slam. It's individual women from all over the country coming to compete in this tournament. The website is wow.poetryslam.com. You can ask me about it later, but it's a really cool national event where, I mean, many women from across the country are coming, and it's a women-based and organized event. It's really great. And I'm competing in it, so I'm gonna do a poem. How many people have ever been to a slam or know what slam poetry is? Cool, we have a really strong, really successful slam scene in the Twin Cities, and I'm really proud to be a part of it. So I'm gonna try not to whack this table really dramatically. So how many people here are in love? Love, what up? How many people here are in love and it's unrequited? Anybody? No? Cool, just me? No, I was in love with one of my best friends for 3 years, and I like to say all I got was this stupid poem. Just kidding. This is on watching someone you love somebody else. You will be out with friends when the news of her existence is accidentally spilled all over your bar stool. Respond calmly, as if it was only a change in weather, a punchline you saw coming. After your fourth shot of cheap liquor, leave the image of him kissing another woman in the toilet. In the morning, her name will be in every headline. Car crash, robbery, flood. When he calls you, ignore the hundreds of ropes untangling themselves from your stomach. You are the best friend again. When he invites you over for dinner, say yes too easily. Remind yourself, this isn't special. It's only dinner. Everyone has to eat. When he greets you at the door, do not think for 1 second you are the reason he wore cologne tonight. Someone told you once, a soulmate is not the person who makes you the happiest, but the one who makes you feel the most, who can conduct your heart to bang the loudest, who can drag you giggling with forgiveness from the cellar they locked you in. It has always been him. In his kitchen, he will hand feed you a piece of red pepper. His laugh will be low and warm, and it will make you feel like candlelight. Do not think this is special. Do not count on your fingers the number of freckles you could kiss too easily. Try to think of pilot lights or olive oil, not everything you have ever loved about him, or it will suddenly feel boiling and possible and so close. You will find her bobby pins lying innocently on his bathroom sink. Her bobby pins. They look like the wiry legs of spiders, splinters of her undressing in his bed. Do not say anything. Think of stealing them, wearing them home in your hair. When he hugs you goodbye, let him kiss you on the forehead. Settle for target practice. At home, you will picture her across town, pressing her fingers into his back like wet cement. You will wonder if she looks like you. If you are 2 bedrooms in the same house, did he fall for her features like rearranged furniture when he kisses her? Does she taste like wet paint? You will want to call him. You will go as far as holding the phone in your hand. Imagine telling him unimaginable things like, you are always ticking inside of me, and I dream of you more often than I don't. My body is a dead language, and you pronounce each word perfectly. Do not call him. Fall asleep to the hum of the VCR. She must make him happy. She must be his favorite place in Minneapolis. You are a souvenir shop where he goes to remember how much people miss him when he's gone. Thank you very much.
And let's see. Thanks again to all of you for coming and doing this tonight. I'm going to read a couple of poems, and then we'll transition into the Q&A. I'm going to begin with, let's see. I was a disillusioned little girl. Barbie wrecked me. And I think every poet eventually writes a Barbie poem, every female poet, maybe, right? And so this is mine. Dr. Barbie's abortion clinic. Girls that party like Barbie on the beaches of Malibu must have that occasional birth control failure, have to make a discreet visit to Dr. Barbie, who of course has had her own sexual adventures and understands completely that she needs to do her part to make sure there is never a visibly pregnant Barbie, which would lead to a morning sickness Barbie, stretch mark Barbie, and varicose vein Barbie, which, considering Ken's wayward ways, would lead to a single mom Barbie, postpartum depression Barbie, lose the baby weight Barbie, and leaky, saggy breast Barbie. Too much reality for a little girl to take, thinks Dr. Barbie. If this celebration of motherhood is really necessary, better to skip ahead to MILF Barbie, super suburban mom Barbie, or even better, stepmom trophy wife Barbie. That's the kind of thing a little girl should really set her sights on. Okay, I don't write a lot of prose poems, but this is one of them. I went back and got my MFA after years of doing other things, and this was the title poem of my MFA thesis. It's called Mother America. Mother America did not breastfeed because it would have spoiled her perfect grapefruit-sized, tomato-firm breasts. So her children lived on milk from her cows, spiked with antibiotics, sucked on latex nipples, held on to plastic bottles, thought, this is my mother. Mother America lives in a trailer on the edge of town, works a minimum wage job taking money at the gas station. She knows everyone in town, and they feel sorry for her, an overweight single mom raising 2 ungrateful teenage boys. She hasn't bought herself a new outfit for 3 years. Her hair is wild, and she doesn't bother with makeup. After closing time, she sucks the cocks of her friends' husbands in the back seat of her Impala, $20 a pop, uses the money to buy some pot from the town cop, lights up, and thinks about the good old days. Mother America gets a pedicure every week and tips the Vietnamese girl $10 just to keep her loyal. Mother America has a personal trainer, a nanny, granite countertops. Mother America is at home even less than her CEO husband. Her heels click on the sidewalk, blood-red toenails lined up like prisoners on the edge of her shoes. Mother America is angry at her sagging belly, sad breasts, her body loved and bred to ruin, only rubble around the frame of the beauty she once was. Men built her up, then laid waste to her, and still they come to cling, to suck, to be kissed and pressed to her breast. There, 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 there. Yeah, that was kind of a cranky poem. That's okay. It was when Bush was president. And my last one is based on a dream I had. That's kind of a theme, isn't it? We've had a few dream poems. Aging gracefully. I am searching for more mistakes to make, errors in judgment, like buying 200 rolls of toilet paper or impulsive blurting, telling the bag boy I dreamed of him last night, French kissing a navel orange behind my back. Errors are better than wrinkle creams, dermabrasion, even Botox. They keep the face flushed, expression haunted, eyes wide, no crow's feet visible, no smoker wrinkles around the mouth. Mistakes can make men follow me home. Less than perfect is so irresistible. Some sure thing to measure his dick up to and have it come out longer somehow. After I dye my hair, trying for dark auburn, but getting purple, I'll cook supper, burn the potatoes, undercook the chicken, and end up eating half a peach filled with cottage cheese, wishing I could have brought myself to peel that navel orange and take a big lick of it myself. Thank you. One of the reasons that I chose to ask all of these wonderful poets to talk with us tonight is because in all of their books you do see issues relating to gender and the relationships between men and women, and they all address it so differently. And so I came up with a few questions to ask them, and we're going to consider 2 questions, and then I'll open it up to you if you have questions that you'd like to ask the poets as well. But the first question I'd like to ask is, how do each of you see gender in terms of your poetry content, process, career, and or aesthetic? You know, just talking about how you view that. And we've already talked about it. They have to share microphones, so you just grab it. You know, just go.
Okay, I'll go. Well, I got so carried away with your questions, I actually prepared
That's awesome.
some notes. Well, I was afraid I was going to forget things. You know, but when I started to think about it, I mean, clearly, you know, I'm the elderess. I'm the crone on the panel.
The wise one.
The crone, the wise woman. So I started thinking about how much things have changed, and yet how much things remain the same. So I have just a little paragraph here I'm going to read. I can't talk about my career as a poet without talking about community. As the elder member of the panel, I wanted to give a little background on women poets in publishing, as I've been familiar with it. I give this history because it seems to me that one of the dangers today is historical amnesia, and a kind of Pollyanna sense of how much better everything is in terms of women writing that has encouraged forgetfulness and some complacency. We're all probably familiar with recent data from VIDA as of last year on their webpage, which they went back and looked at major American literary publications and looked at them in terms of representation of men to women, and were able to demonstrate, as far as the data, that the underrepresentation of women continued across all the major literary publications. And these were publications both in anthologies, but also, and almost, well, I won't say more importantly, but as importantly, in terms of book reviews, so that if you look at the New York Times Literary Book Review, the number of men reviewed to the number of women women writers reviewed showed a great discrepancy. Numbers don't tell the whole story, but certainly that data would seem to contradict our assumptions that we've reached some kind of equity. We haven't. So that brought me to think about my development as a poet in Minnesota, and remembering that in 1971, which was only 42 years ago, not a long time, Minnesota Women Poets of the Twin Cities was founded by a small group of women who desired to encourage and share their work at readings, and also desired to encourage the writing by women about women's experiences. At that time, with only very rare exceptions, almost all the poets giving readings were men, which restricted the possibilities of poetry, particularly if poetry is regarded as the art of experience as well as imagination. These women went on to meet. They were meeting as recently as a few years ago. The group would reconstitute itself every so many years, but it continued, and maybe meeting today. I'm not sure of that, but certainly were up until that time. So when I think of, and I'm going to close in a minute, when I think of my development as a writer, I feel very fortunate that I came to writing, and I came to poetry at a time when a lot was changing. I don't want us to get complacent about how much things have changed, and that we don't need to be vigilant, continuing to be vigilant about women and about women's writing.
Okay. You can take it out of there too.
Well, the question was so large that the only thing I could do with it was speak for myself. And I have to say the best thing that ever happened to me is that I got sent to an all-women's college as an undergraduate, and I went kicking and screaming. I thought it was the worst thing that could possibly happen, but my parents sort of forced it on me. And it turned out that I had mostly women as teachers, and I read mostly women writers. In fact, we complained that we weren't reading any men. And that was where I started writing. That was where I got my sense of myself. And then I went to graduate school, and it was all just the opposite. But I saw it differently given where I was coming from. Mm-hmm. And I think if you can find a way to internalize the female tradition first, and then come to everything else that's out there, it looks different, and it will always look different. And for me personally, I think it's been a wonderful thing, and it's also been a handicap. I see things differently as a result of that strange reversal. On the other hand, it's the thing that sent me looking for women mentors, and that's advice that I would give is if you are a woman, look for female mentors. They exist, and they've always been, for me anyway, much more generous. Mm-hmm. So, Oh, you have one.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. How do you see issues of gender in terms of your poetry? And you can talk about any element of your poetry.
Yeah, thank you. I think I would like to, what I can bring to the panel is my experience in spoken word, although I am kind of like developing away from that right now. But it was a very interesting experience to be a part of the spoken word community when it was just developing in the Twin Cities 5-6 years ago. I found that not only was I one of the only successful female poets, but all of my mentoring, all of my coaching was coming from men, and I found myself even like, and I wonder if other women in the audience or in the panel have felt this way. I felt like I couldn't write about women's issues and be respected, and I felt like I had to approach non-women's issues from like a more masculine point of view. Like I couldn't be feminine and respected on stage. And this is very competition-based, but I think it goes across the board in writing. My personal journey with that has been trying to like walk that line while being successful as a writer and a performer, but being true to myself. I find that, especially, I guess, not even my situation or my experience, but witnessing so many poets. My job right now is to perform at colleges and go to slams and feature there, and I've seen probably 3,000 poems a month, okay, something crazy like that. And you wouldn't believe how, and this might sound cliche, but it's true. The worst truths are cliches, that a woman could be on stage and be reading a poem, and it wouldn't be well received, and a man could do the same thing, and it would be. And that, again, I understand that that's cliche, but doesn't that suck that it's cliche and true? So I guess that's what I can bring to it is like, when I was younger too, and when I wasn't so sure of what I was doing, or wasn't so confident in my feminism or my sense of self, or even being a woman, I found myself being easily swayed and pushed in those directions, and feeling like I couldn't talk about those things, and I couldn't talk about my period on stage, without grossing everyone out. My bad, but deal with it. And I really carried a lot of those pressures with me through the first couple years of my career. Thankfully, now I have a better sense of self and more pride as a woman, and that I am slowly shedding them, I guess. Great.
Well, I really wanted to be a rock and roll star rather than a poet. But when I was deciding if I was going to sell my acoustic guitar for an electric one in 1973, there weren't any women rockers. If I had waited just a few more years, Joan Jett and the Runaways were there. But I kind of came of age during that milieu in the 70s and the 80s, where there weren't a lot of women writers. I went to college, and we didn't read a lot of women writers. I didn't get to go to the all-women's college. But I did take a lot of sociology classes, and I really did kind of grasp onto this idea that the personal was political. And there's a reason that there is a pregnant woman on the front of my book cover. I did see that as a political act. And so I do, in many ways, try to write about my life, but try to write about some of those feminine experiences that are universal, but for so many years have not been seen as universal. And so, through my own personal experience, try to open those doors just a little bit more.
I have one. And I think I should speak into it. I went to a very male graduate program when somewhere early on in the first year, one of my professors lamented to me that now that we weren't required to send pictures with our applications, the women who came just weren't as attractive as they used to be. But I also had a wonderful mentor in Patty Ann Rogers, and we had a very famous poet come to as a visiting poet, and Patty Ann's a scientist, and her husband's a scientist, and she always gets excited about science, and she was talking about how she and her husband were learning how the plane stays up, and the air goes over the wing and faster than it goes under the wing, or I forget, and that's how it holds the plane up. And he looked at her and smiled kind of indulgently and shook his head and said, "Oh, I don't know if I believe that." And she looked, and she told me later she felt like she had to say something for all the women's sake, and she looked at him and she said, "You flew here, didn't you?" But I'd like to talk about something that I think is kind of small, but I want to bring it up because I think that gender can be a complicated thing, and the route back to why things happen the way they do isn't always as clear as you would think. My husband and I had been talking with someone a couple years ago about how to maximize our job performance, and he had said to John, "Can you write when Katrina's home?" And he said, "Oh yeah, of course." And he said, "Can she write when you're home?" And he said, "No." And I always thought this was a very weird thing that was just me, and I don't mean my husband forbids me to, but I've always got like one ear listening outside the door thinking, he opened the fridge, I wonder if he's hungry, and it wasn't anything he did, but apparently this is a very common issue with women, that they have a very hard time. They've been socialized to be very responsive to other people's needs, and so a lot of times women have trouble writing if other people are home. And I thought, part of me was relieved. I thought, thank goodness I'm not just the weird one, but it was also an interesting thing I hadn't thought of, that how much my process had been shaped by that. Because I love to write early in the morning before anybody is up, so that I don't, and I now know it's because I don't want to have to think about anyone else.
Great, thank you. The next question I'd like to know the answer to, because I don't know the answer, so you guys have to tell me. No, I'm just kidding. What challenge or barrier, creative or otherwise, what was a challenge or barrier, creative or otherwise, that you faced with publishing your work, and how did you overcome it? And the reason I'm asking this is because, we've been made aware by Vita and by some other articles that there is still a publishing gap with women and men, and I know that all of us have had different paths to publication, but what was a barrier maybe that you've overcome?
I have a quick, easy answer, and I had an unusual path into publishing. I was 23 when I got my first book published, and I had no idea what I was doing, no clue. And I truly believe that my biggest issue with publishing has absolutely 100% been deciding if my voice was worth reading, and how do I balance it's more than just self-esteem too. It's like deciding, how do I balance like what people expect me to write, like how am I writing, what do they want to read, what's going to sell, what am I going to be proud of in 5 years, and is this actually worth anything? With how do I balance all of that and then write 40 to 60 poems, to be ripped apart by an editor, how do you deal with that? And I think I'm still very young, and I think that is hopefully something that I will grow out of. Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
I think a big challenge is, for me, has been trying very hard not to be pegged as a domestic poet. And the poor editors at Milkweed, I was just begging them up and down, don't mention marriage, don't mention family, don't, let's talk about power. I was really looking hard for themes in my book that would sort of go around that, because I've had trouble being reviewed as somebody. I've seen in too many reviews things like Katrina writes about her marriage and her family and her memories, and it becomes very much this memory-based idea instead of being idea-driven. Whereas, you know, when my husband, who wrote a book that has an awful lot in it about family, you know, they would write reviews that would say Reiminger examines the tension between domestic life and blah blah. But it wasn't reduced to, well, this is just his life. And so I've just worked very hard when promoting my work to frame it as something that is that includes family life and love and the past, but doesn't end there. And I think that is a trap that a lot of women struggle with as far as having their work received.
I think that idea of the woman writer as dabbler, as scribbler, as not writing seriously was something I internalized. So I think the greatest barrier I've had has been internal. I had a very male-focused graduate program like some of you did, and my thesis was called Hanging Out with the Boys. But it took me a while to get over that and to value my own work. And then I think that I kind of went to bed with the first guy that asked me out on a date. You know, the first publisher that asked me for my book, I'm like, oh, sure, yeah, you can have it. And it happened again. Oh, sure, you can have the manuscript. And I love my publishers, and I'm proud to be a Minnesota poet. But I do think that I have not valued my own work enough because of that message. And we get that in our book reviews. We just are surrounded by that. So stay strong.
Yeah, I agree, and I just, especially with, you know, what Sierra said, and you were saying that, kind of couching it in being a young poet, but it doesn't get any easier. I'm sorry. But it doesn't. And I think you do, you know, you get to the point where, well, you've published, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 books, and you stick your head up and, you know, still trying to figure out exactly, you know, not what the value is so much, but it's, you know, questions of the work, and then, and of course, once you get beyond a certain point, you're wondering, well, maybe my best work is behind me now, so, but I don't want to talk about that.
I will say, I mean, I think, and I don't know, it's my experience. When I came out of graduate school, it was a long time ago, when I came out of Iowa, none of us were getting published. Not the guys, not the women, and we didn't expect to. We all had been told that we shouldn't expect to, and that we would probably wait 10 years for a first book. And so I didn't feel too put upon waiting, and it was 10 years. And it was 10 years of working hard, but so were all the guys. And I think that was actually a good experience because I had to wait a long time. I worked hard for it, and when it finally came, it didn't feel easy. I don't know that that's the way things are now. I mean, I think that, you know, it happens now that it's more, sometimes people get published when they're really young or something just happens and it blows up. And I don't know how people deal with that. But for me, that sort of long, slow move toward the first book was very good. And now I try hard not to rush the next book until it's really cooked, until it's really, I feel it's ready to go out. On the other hand, I think sometimes for sure, and women in general, we're our own worst enemies when it comes to publishing, because I don't send things out as much as I should. And it wilts me and makes me tired and anxious when I hear guys I know, oh yeah, I've got 50 in the mail. And I'm just like, God, I can't get 3 in the mail. You know, I'm doing 50 things. And I think what I want to do is just get it written. And I can worry about the rest later, but then that's the part that doesn't really happen. And I know that lots of editors say, we're just not getting stuff from women. It's not that we don't want it. We're just not getting it. And it's because we're all cooking dinner for the kids or running into hockey practice, or, you know, you write because you have to. You would just curl up and die if you didn't write. But the publishing part is kind of the gravy, and I let it go sometimes. And I think I have to work harder to make sure that, all the stages of the process happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I have heard other editors say that too, also, that they'll get something from a woman who they think is really good and the poems are almost there, but they just can't take them for whatever reason, and they will write on that slip, "Send again." And they said when they send that back, men will turn around and send poems again, and then they don't hear from the woman.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've my editor friends say that's a source of frustration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually went to a panel at AWP last year that addressed that very issue, and it was a bunch of women encouraging all of us women in the audience to keep submitting, and a lot of people in the audience were actually talking about how, yeah, if I get 2 rejections, I just stop sending it out, and the men were like, well, I sent it out 25 times, and so I think there really is a difference there too. Like, you start losing confidence in a piece if it gets rejected a certain number of times. I think it's a different number for everybody, but maybe for women, we just kind of, oh, I better revise that again before I send it out, kind of thing too. So yeah. Is there anybody with a question from the audience that they'd like the panel to answer? Yeah, Morgan?
I'd like to segue from talking about the publishing piece into talking about promotion. And once you do have the books and the promotion, I too find it difficult to keep sending stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
And not so much even because I've lost confidence in things, but just because I've so much to do. And as you said, Leslie, I'd rather be writing. I'd much rather be writing, revising, whatever.
So more,
But even
sorry.
worse than sending stuff out is promotion for me. I mean, I hate putting myself out there.
So I'm going to repeat the question. Morgan wants to know about promoting books. How do you make time for that, and how do you do it effectively? Yeah. Okay.
I cannot promote as easily as I did for my first book, because my first book I didn't have a child, so I could just hop in the car every weekend, and now there's a lot less of that I can do. But one of the things that I had watched another poet friend do that just made it seem very easy and natural was every time she was traveling somewhere, she would look to where the independent bookstore was in the city, where the reading series was, and she would just plan ahead that way. And she ended up doing a lot of readings in a lot of parts of the country and ending up with a lot of press. It works really very easily. And I was at an artist colony once, and one day I was getting ready to go do a reading at the bookstore in the town, and somebody said, "Oh, did your agent set that up for you?" All of us poets can laugh. Having an agent. But I had just once, as soon as I found out I had a residency, I found the bookstore and I wrote to the man and said, and I always ask, is there a good local poet you think I might pair well with? And I never make it a question of pressure. I understand all of the reasons you might take me or not take me, but I just want you to know I'll be in the area and I'd love to read with a local person. And it just feels natural because you're going to those places anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Social media has made it easier for mothers, so I can have dinner cooking and the kids in the background and still be tweeting and posting stuff on Facebook and emailing, setting up a date for a reading. It doesn't take as much focused concentration as revising a poem or writing a poem or revising that poem so that you're going to send it out would. So I actually think that it's a little bit easier in some ways than doing some of the other parts of writing, because it's fragmented and it doesn't take a whole lot of your attention. But it's also an introvert-extrovert thing as well, too.
I think of my writing poet side of my brain and my promotion side of the brain as totally 2 different jobs. And that might not be the most fruitful advice, but I clock into one, I clock out, and I clock into the other. Social media is great. And one that I am just falling in love with is collaboration. I mean, Kris has brought me out to a reading before. as well as all of these other women, I'm sure. Finding other women, finding other authors, yeah. That's what it is.
I have no good advice because I'm totally allergic to that activity. But I think, I mean, I've thought a lot about it, and I'm pretty sure I know why. Because when I went to graduate school, again, it was a long time ago, it was completely taboo to talk about these things at that time. When I went to Iowa, if anybody talked about their publishing or anything, everybody looked at them like they had just farted. You know, it was just seriously a social faux pas to talk about it, and I internalized that. So for me, it's very difficult to ask, you know, can I give a reading, can I do this, can I do that, because I'm really programmed the other way. I'm also fairly introverted. So it's difficult. But, you know, I look to my friends who are really good at it, and I say, yeah, maybe I can do that after all.
Yeah. I just want to say, as I pass the mic, I'm teaching a class on promotion and publishing for my community college students right now, and it's almost all women. So hopefully we will have another generation that actually know how to go out about doing it.
You know, I found it helpful to just be really clear about it being, you know, another person, another job, another thing, the alter ego that I do this then, but it doesn't come over here, and just when my book came out, I was really clear about some things that I wanted to accomplish with that, and willing to take the time away from writing and reading and dreaming and thinking to just do that. I don't like to do it. I wish I didn't have to do it. I wish somebody else would do it for me. But I don't think that that's going to happen. So as long as I'm really clear that it's, you know, these are two very divergent aspects of the work, and keep them separate like that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, and I kind of had a unique experience with this. My very first job was in marketing. When I got out of college, I wrote copy for the Iowa Visitor's Guide. Yeah, I know a lot about Iowa, but I did learn a lot about marketing. I didn't stay in the field, obviously. I wasn't allergic to it, but I didn't really enjoy it, and so but I did learn some things about it. And unlike a lot of poets, I'm like an incurable extrovert, and so it's easy for me to do a lot of the things. I love doing those things. In fact, you know, it's kind of, for me, it's a balance issue to get back to the desk and start writing again. So I think it's different for everybody. But part of my Minnesota State Arts Board grant funded me to hire a publicist. And I was like the only poet with a publicist in Minnesota, I think, this year, and people would call me and from reading series and say, "Your publicist called me. You have a publicist, you know?" And I'm like, "Only for a few months, right? Because you know." But I learned a lot from her, you know, and so I would encourage anybody who's, you know, looking at, you know, when you apply for grants or if you come into some money somehow, I think it's a worthy investment to have somebody else do that stuff for you, you know, and then you don't spend all your time, you know, trying to figure all that out. Somebody's already figured it out, and they know people, you know, and that worked out really, really well for me. And if, you know, I'm lucky enough to publish a second book, I would do that all over again, so that I wouldn't have to, you know, do that all the time. And, you know, I don't know how you guys felt, but you get sick of asking for blurbs, you get sick of asking for favors all the time, and if you have somebody else doing that for you, you don't have to ask anymore, you know, so. But I think the other thing I would add to that too is that as a poet, you belong to a community, and here in, you know, the Twin Cities in Minnesota, a lot of us know each other, you know, and if you don't know somebody, it's one degree of separation, you know, you can find out that person. And if you're a active community person, you know, if you're giving back to the community, good things will come to you. I mean, it's a very 60s notion, but, you know, it's like you give what you get, I think, with that sort of thing. And you know, be a giver. You know, be generous with your time, do things for free, you know, go out to schools and talk to kids and stuff, and and you build your community contacts, and a lot of times stuff just comes to you. You don't have to go out looking for it. Yeah. Any other questions?
Just had a real quick one.
Sure.
Just wondering if anybody's noticed any, on the publishing point, if there are any similarities in other art forms, whether it's like music, the male-female difference, musicians trying to get gigs, visual artists trying to get exhibits. Does that kind of male-female difference exist in those other art forms as well, or no?
So the question was, and I'm not sure any of us know the answer, but is the gender difference the same in the other arts, music, theater, visual art?
Yeah, and specifically being real intentional about submitting 50 times versus 2 or 3 where, you know.
And submitting rates as well, yeah.
Right, yeah.
Katrina?
The one thing I knew, which now that you're clarifying your question might not apply so much, was that once symphonies did their tryouts where the musician was behind a screen and you couldn't see the sex of the musician, the number of women in symphony orchestras shot up.
Wow.
And that was fairly recent.
Oh. Do any of the rest of you know any? I don't know anything about the other art forms in that regard, do you?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure about today, but as I was looking back at the beginning of the Women Poets of the Twin Cities, I thought, oh yeah, that was the same time that WARM started, and WARM was the Women's Art Registry, and these were visual artists, painters, and I don't know if there were sculptors, but certainly painters and watercolorists, and who couldn't get shows and couldn't get into the galleries, and so they started their own gallery. Now they also still exist and still meet. They don't have they had a specific gallery, a site for quite a while, but they don't have that now. But I would guess that there still are certainly iniquities in the gallery museum system in terms of shows, and it's better, like it has been in publishing. It's better, but not perfect. Yeah.
They're celebrating their 40th anniversary.
Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for coming. It's been a really enjoyable evening, and thanks again to all of our fantastic poets for reading tonight. I'd like to give them all a hand when they